He once slept in his car. He was rejected over 600 times, and then one day he became the Hulk and conquered the world. This is the story of Mark Ruffalo, a man who turned every blow life gave him into a spark of hope. Mark Ruffalo was born on November 22, 1967, in Kenosha, Wisconsin. His father was a house painter and his mother a hairdresser. Life for young Mark was chaotic, often unpredictable. He struggled with dyslexia and undiagnosed depression, a cocktail of confusion, frustration, and self-doubt. School wasn't just hard, it was terrifying. When the family moved to California, he finished high school but never felt like he belonged anywhere. He wasn't wealthy, he wasn't confident, but inside something burned, a deep need to express. That spark found its first light in theater class. The first time he stepped on stage, he felt at home. Something clicked. Mark enrolled in a small acting school in Los Angeles, but he also had to work as a bartender for 9 years just to survive. He once said, "Everything I learned about struggle, I learned while pouring drinks." He was rejected over 600 times at auditions. Too soft-spoken, too shy, too ordinary. But he showed up, again and again. Sometimes he'd ride his bike home in tears, whispering to himself, "Maybe I'm not meant for this." But something in him, a quiet stubbornness, refused to quit. His first small TV and indie film roles came and went. But it was in 2000's You Can Count on Me that he truly broke through. That role changed everything. The industry finally saw him. Offers began coming in. But little did he know, just as his career was taking off, his greatest battle was just around the corner. It was 2001. Mark Ruffalo was finally seeing momentum in his career. After You Can Count on Me, he became a darling of indie cinema. Directors were calling, producers were noticing, critics were praising his authenticity. But then, life hit the brakes. One morning, Mark woke up to find the right side of his face numb. He thought it was stress, fatigue. But over the next few days, the numbness worsened. His expressions dulled. His speech slowed. After an MRI, doctors gave him crushing news. Mark had a brain tumor. It was benign, yes, but large and dangerously close to essential facial nerves. He needed surgery immediately. And with it came the terrifying possibility. He might lose his ability to speak or move his face. For an actor, whose entire career depended on expression, this wasn't just a health scare, it was a spiritual crisis. Mark said, "Just when I started to rise, I was told I could fall all the way down again." His wife, Sunrise Coiney, stood by him. "I didn't see a celebrity," she said. "I saw a warrior." The surgery was successful, but not without consequence. Mark developed Bell's palsy, partial facial paralysis. The right side of his face was frozen, his speech was slurred, his smile was gone. Doctors told him recovery could take years, if at all, but Mark Ruffalo wasn't done. Every day he sat in front of the mirror, trying to move his cheek, raise his eyebrow, speak a line, reclaim his identity. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, he began to return. After his brain surgery, Mark Ruffalo's body was tired, but his spirit was wide awake. His facial muscles began recovering slowly, but something had changed. Mark was no longer just an actor. He was a man with scars and stories. That depth, that lived-in pain, began to reflect in his performances. In 2003's In the Cut and 2004's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, he played small but powerful roles. Each look, each pause seemed to carry a lifetime of emotion. But it was 2007's Zodiac that reintroduced Mark Ruffalo to the world. As Inspector David Toschi, he wasn't just investigating a serial killer, he was battling internal ghosts. You didn't just watch Mark, you felt him. Directors started recognizing something rare in him. An actor who didn't perform, he embodied. Around this time, Mark Ruffalo took another bold leap. He stepped behind the camera. In 2009, he directed Sympathy for Delicious, a raw indie film about a paralyzed DJ. It wasn't just a story. It was a reflection of his own pain and survival. Mark said, "When you create from your deepest wounds, it can never feel fake." That same year, he starred in The Kids Are All Right, a powerful LGBTQ+ family drama that went on to earn an Oscar nomination. By now, Mark Ruffalo had transformed into Hollywood's go-to actor for realness, rawness, and emotional resonance. By 2010, Mark Ruffalo was respected in indie cinema, loved by critics and admired by fellow actors. But he still hadn't entered the mainstream blockbuster world. Then came a call from Marvel Studios. The role? Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk. Edward Norton had stepped away from the role, and Marvel wanted someone different. Someone who could bring depth, pain, and human conflict to a character known for rage. At first, Mark wasn't sure. "I'm not exactly superhero material," he said. But director Joss Whedon told him, "We don't want a Hulk who just smashes. We want a Hulk who's broken and still survives." Mark agreed. He learned motion capture, he trained in physical nuance. And more importantly, he understood Bruce Banner's trauma. In 2012, the Avengers hit theaters. And audiences didn't just fall in love with Hulk, they connected with Bruce Banner. His iconic line, "That's my secret, Cap. I'm always angry," wasn't just a line, it was a life story. Mark Ruffalo became more than a superhero. He became proof that broken people make the best heroes. From battling inner demons to battling Thanos, Mark made Bruce Banner deeply human and incredibly unforgettable. After the Avengers, Mark Ruffalo had everything, a fame, fortune, fans. But he didn't stay silent behind the glow of stardom. Instead, he used his voice to speak up. For people, for justice, and for the planet. Mark had always felt a connection with nature. But when he witnessed the devastating effects of fracking in Pennsylvania, polluted water, cracked lands, sick communities, he couldn't stay silent. Fracking, or hydraulic fracturing, is a method to extract gas and oil by injecting chemicals underground. But it poisons water, destabilizes Earth, and ruins lives. Mark founded Water Defense, an environmental organization that actively investigated toxic water contamination across the US. He didn't just tweet from a distance. He traveled, took water samples himself, spoke with families, and demanded answers from officials. In 2014, he addressed the United Nations Climate Summit, openly criticizing fossil fuel giants and government inaction. Mark said, "We don't need superheroes. We need people with the courage to speak truth." His activism drew praise, but also pushback. Certain producers distanced themselves. He was subtly dropped from film projects. But Mark stood tall. For him, acting and activism weren't separate. They were expressions of his soul. He once said, "If you can't work with me because I speak the truth, maybe you don't deserve my art." In the middle of Hollywood fame and Marvel madness, Mark Ruffalo's real world lies tucked away, in a peaceful home surrounded by trees, far from paparazzi. He often jokes, "When I turn into the Hulk, my kids don't scream, they laugh." Mark's wife, Sunrise Coyne, is a former actress. They met in the 1990s, back when Mark was struggling, unknown, and literally without a car. Sunrise saw beyond the ambition. She once said, "There was a truth in Mark I couldn't ignore." They got married in 2000, at a time when Mark had no fame, no certainty. But Sunrise believed in the dream and, more importantly, in the man. They now have 3 children, Keen, Bella Noche, and Odette. Mark says being a father matters more than being an actor. When he's not on set, he's dropping the kids to school, cooking meals, and gardening. He said, "When I'm home, I'm not Bruce Banner, I'm just Dad, and that's my favorite role." He even brought his kids to Marvel sets, letting them try on Thor's hammer, wear Iron Man's helmet, and run around giant green screens. But he's not just a fun dad. He's a conscious parent, teaching his kids empathy, justice, and mindfulness. His parenting mantra, be kind, be aware, be present. Mark Ruffalo proves that you can be both, a global icon and a deeply rooted family man. After his Marvel success, Mark Ruffalo could have taken the easy road, action flicks, commercial roles, box office formulas. But he didn't. For Mark, acting wasn't a career, and it was a calling. In 2014, he starred in HBO's The Normal Heart, a powerful film based on the early days of the AIDS crisis and the fight for LGBTQ+ rights. He played Ned Weeks, a furious, grieving, defiant man demanding justice for a dying community. Ruffalo gave the role soul, fire, and heartbreak. He said, "This role awakened both the activist and the actor in me." The performance earned him Emmy and Golden Globe nominations and made many in Hollywood recognize him as a fearless actor. In the same year, Mark starred in Foxcatcher, playing a conflicted Olympic wrestling coach trapped between love, loyalty, and silence. It was dark, it was heavy, and it earned him an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Then came the film that changed everything, Spotlight, 2015. Based on the true story of the Boston Globe's Pulitzer-winning investigation into the Catholic Church child sex abuse scandal, Mark played journalist Michael Resendiz with staggering intensity. One critic wrote, "Ruffalo doesn't act, he ignites." Mark said, "Through this film, I was speaking for those silenced for decades." Spotlight won the Oscar for Best Picture, and Ruffalo was nominated again for Best Supporting Actor. By now, Mark wasn't just a movie star. He was a moral force in cinema. He chose projects that mattered, roles that hurt, stories that needed to be told. When Mark Ruffalo smiles on screen, most people never guess what he survived behind that smile. Since childhood, Mark struggled with depression, anxiety, and undiagnosed dyslexia. He often felt lost in classrooms, unable to keep up. He once said, "While the other kids breezed through books, I stared at the same line, trying to decode it." This left him feeling slow, different, broken, and those feelings planted seeds of darkness that followed him for years. In his early acting days, every rejection felt like proof of his fears. He admitted, "I often wondered, do I even belong in this world?" When the brain tumor hit, those emotional shadows deepened. Looking in the mirror after partial facial paralysis, he whispered, "Who's ever going to cast me now?" But that was the beginning, not of the end, but of healing. Mark began therapy. He turned to yoga, meditation, and mindfulness. He reframed mental illness not as a defect, but as part of the human experience. He said, "There's shame around mental illness in Hollywood. But I thought, if I don't talk about it, who will?" He now speaks openly in schools, interviews, and online, telling people, "Depression isn't weakness, it's being human." He teaches his children to understand emotions, not suppress them. Through his radical honesty, Mark Ruffalo has become a beacon of hope for those in silent battles. His performances break hearts, but his vulnerability, it heals them. Today, Mark Ruffalo is more than a celebrated actor. He is a movement in motion. When most fans remember him as the Hulk, they often overlook the man off screen, a man who has become a symbol of justice, truth, and humanity. Mark uses his celebrity not for ego, but to amplify voices that are silenced. He consistently chooses stories that provoke, challenge, and enlighten. His roles in Spotlight, The Normal Heart, Dark Waters, they're not just performances, they're protests in disguise. In 2019's Dark Waters, he portrayed a real-life attorney who exposed the deadly pollution caused by chemical giant DuPont. But he didn't stop when the cameras did. He read the real case files. He met the victims. He launched awareness campaigns around toxic water and corporate corruption. That same year, he was awarded the UN Humanitarian Award for his relentless work in climate justice and activism. Today, he's called a climate crusader, truth teller, and the moral conscience of Hollywood. He joins protests. He tweets fearlessly. He shows up with sincerity, with solidarity, with purpose. He once said, "People like me shouldn't stay silent, that's how things stay broken." In a world where fame often erodes authenticity, Mark Ruffalo remains a rare flame, bright, brave, and burning for change. Mark Ruffalo's journey isn't a fairy tale. It's a story of a man who fell into darkness and kept climbing back to the light. He was a dyslexic child, a struggling actor, a man with a brain tumor, a father, an activist, and finally, a force that shook both the cinematic and real world. When you watch Mark on screen, whether as Hulk or a crusading journalist, you're not just watching a performance. You're witnessing a man turning pain into power. His life teaches us, vulnerability is not weakness. It's strength in its rawest form. Depression is not shameful, it's human. Fame is best used when it becomes a microphone for the voiceless. Mark once said, "I found my voice when I stopped waiting to be fearless." And that's why today, he's not just an Oscar nominee or Marvel superhero. He's a living symbol of resilience. His story is for everyone who's ever fallen, ever failed, ever felt forgotten, and still chooses to stand up one more time. If Mark Ruffalo's untold, raw, and inspiring life story moved you, then don't just scroll away. Subscribe to our channel, Inspiro, where we bring you real stories of real legends who rose from the shadows. Because true inspiration doesn't wear a cape. It walks through pain, it speaks truth, and it lives among us. Let the world know. The strongest heroes are the ones who never gave up. Hit that subscribe button and stay inspired.